Przyjechał Jasio, czapkę zdjął. Czapkę zdjął. Witaj Kasiniu, czy zdrowa, czy zdrowa, czy zdrowa, czy zdrowa. Mała nocka paliła się, przywiozłem wianki z Krakowa. Z Krakowa. Przywiozłem wianek ruciany, 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 ruciany. Dla mojej Kasi kochanej, 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 która najładniejsza, ta największa czarownica, która najładniejsza, ta największa czarownica, która najładniejsza, ta największa czarownica, która najładniejsza.
You are listening to KXCJLP 105.7 FM, Cave Junction. The views expressed in the realms of Wyrd World Radio do not reflect KXCJ, its affiliates, underwriters, hosts, and/or directors. One should strive to act with compassion and empathy toward all creatures in accordance with reason. The struggle for justice is an ongoing and necessary pursuit that should prevail over laws and institutions. One's body is inviolable, subject to one's own will alone. The freedoms of others should be respected, including the freedom to offend. To willfully and unjustly encroach upon the freedoms of another is to forego one's own. Beliefs should conform to one's best scientific understanding of the world. One should take care never to distort scientific facts to fit one's beliefs. People are fallible. If one makes a mistake, one should do one's best to rectify it and resolve any harm that might have been caused. Every tenet is a guiding principle designed to inspire nobility in action and thought. The spirit of compassion, wisdom, and justice should always prevail over the written or spoken word. Well, as it would seem, them gummies are kicking in.
Ladies and gentlemen, can I please have your attention? I've just been handed an urgent and horrifying news story. And I need all of you to stop what you're doing and listen.
Nothing new. These cover-ups have happened for thousands and thousands of years.
Could be a crackhead going to the wrong stuff.
You're right, there's no proof, but I mean, there's no proof of Jesus or, you know, people go in the restroom until they tell you about it, you know what I mean? I mean, that's just kind of the way I see things.
From the deep recesses of the mind, in the cavernous realms of limitless possibility through interdimensional multiversal plasmic platforms, broadcasting from a hidden bunker in an undisclosed location somewhere in the Illinois Valley, comes the show Too Controversial for Daytime Programming, bringing you the information they don't want you to hear, every Sunday from 10 p.m. to midnight, leaked live to you right here on KXCJLP 105.7 FM in Cave Junction. This is Wyrd World with Wilden Freeborn.
Hey, all you weirdos. Welcome to another week of Weird World Radio with Wild and Freeborn. This is the newest edition for the new season, officially the first show of Season 2. Bingeable on Netflix. No, it's not. But tonight we're going to be talking about chanting, mantras, language. Are they magical tools of liberation, or are they tools of our imprisonment? It's a great question. Does language free us, or does language confine us to ways of seeing our world? Isn't that lovely, that sound in the background? I like it. I like that sound. It is nice to be back in this studio on this lovely, nearly fall evening. You can smell the rotting of the soon-to-be decaying, falling leaves as they're dying on the limbs. Harboring in another season of change and shift and nourishment. I'm pretty excited about all of it. This is my favorite time of year. I love the autumn. The autumnal spiritual experience of the leaves rustling, and of course, it brings with it Halloween. And what could be better than another season of the dead running through our streets and taking all of our candy? It's a lot of fun. I'm really excited for this year's festivities, as well as some of the things we have going on here in the Valley that are pretty special to us. We got some cool things happening, so I'll be talking about those throughout the show tonight as well. But the phone lines are going to be open this evening again. It's 541-592-4112. Again, it's 541-592-4112. And you are listening to KXCJLP 105.7 FM Cave Junction. That's 105.7 on the terrestrial radio dial. But you can also listen to us through www.kxcj.org. And if you're on a smartphone or some kind of device, you may have to scroll to the bottom or find that little red Listen Now button, but go ahead and do that and give it a hit. If you are watching us on the social media video stream, it's actually not us. I say us as if it's you're watching the royal we. That's what this is, because it's just me in here these days. I have effectively run off all of my co-hosts, I think. I don't know. But actually, the show right before us, Folk the System, that is Scout's show, is now being kept alive by Angela, who was my co-host here. So instead of her having double duties for 4 hours on the radio each week, she does that one and I do this one. And yeah, so you're going to have to call in tonight and help us keep the flow rolling. But I'm pretty excited about what we're talking about. Anybody that actually knows me in the real world probably knows that I like to talk a lot. And even if you don't know me in the real world, if you listen to my radio show, it's obvious to you that I like to talk a lot because it's a radio show. And that's what you do on the radio. If I didn't talk, well, you see, that doesn't work. So one of the things that I've found is I have a real interest in language, in the way language works on deeper levels in our brain. I'm not a neuropathologist, but I do like the way that we can make these associations between the semantic history and roots of these words, as well as the phonetic sounds that these words make, and the effect that they can have on our psyche, on our spiritual being, on our physical being. That's right. I'm saying that the way that we make sounds with our mouth can actually alter our physical health. And we'll get into that throughout this show tonight. What you were listening to coming in, that chant, was actually Awin, which is it's a druidic chant coming out of the Isle of Wales, which has now been absorbed into the United Kingdom. Well, not now. It's not like a new thing. It's been absorbed for quite some time. But it's still absorbed. I'll say that. They're still calling it the United Kingdom. And that may be changing soon as well. It seems that the sun is setting on the British Empire, possibly, but any of us who are involved with the mystery schools understand that the shifting of the names of these powerful entities is merely the smoke and mirrors that we see on the stage, but behind the curtains, it's still the same families running the same game. So we'll see how that's going to play out, this power game, as we have these shifts occurring in public empowerment. And, I'm not sure if social media and the internet and this supposed connectedness is an actual connectedness, or if it's just a way to further isolate us and to convince us we're connected, or to not be so cynical. Is it possible that these levels of communication are actually going to eventually end up leveling some playing fields and horizontalizing power a little bit? I'm not sure. But I do know that I am pretty grateful that I can access information of the things I'd like to know, and I'm highly skeptical of the importance of information. I don't know if information is actually that important. I think there's this paradigm and this meme within our culture that stems way back to Western exceptionalism and this materialist scientific way of viewing the world comes equipped with its own self-importance by saying things like, education is of the highest importance, and the more educated a population is, the more free they are to make democratic decisions and all this. But I think that, maybe we're seeing the opposite of that. Maybe we're seeing something different, because what is education except for the teaching of biases and the stripping of experience and the replacing of experience with a prepackaged definition. And I'm sure that's a broad swath that I'm cutting through an entire way of understanding the world. But like we say here at Weird World, and again, me and the Queen, we say this all the time, like just for no reason. In the middle of conversation, I'll just say it. It's not what you believe that matters. It's what you're willing to question. I don't actually say that all the time. I only say it on Sundays on the show. But, I don't have to admit everything to you people. Anyway, so the song that you heard, the chant coming in, was Awen. And it's a chant of divinity coming from the culture of Druidism. Now, we have this kind of gap in our lineage of understanding of Druidry. So what we are now seeing practiced in Druidry is an estimation of what had begun, but also a modern retelling and understanding of the connection to the nature spirits of that specific place in Wales, where Druidry kind of stems out from. It's one of the center places of Druidry. Of course, you can go to Ireland, England, Spain, most of the Celtic regions, France, Spain, Brittany, Galicia, Wales, Scotland, Ireland, England, and all of these places were foundational birthplaces, or not birthplaces, but places from which these beliefs came from the land. This is an indigenous way of seeing the world. So that said, there's not a single way of seeing it. So a lot of our understanding that we have of modern Druidry comes from Wales, and it comes from a specific strain of understanding the Druids' connections through language and chanting and various prayers and songs and spells and rituals and ceremonies. Now, that said, there's going to be varying earth-based understandings throughout those regions. So it's not a monolith, just like Native America. There's no monolithic Native American religion. These are very, very different cultures all over our continent that have instructions from the earth, from the source, from the mother, the father, the great spirit, the God, the whatever language is used to define or to at least express an understanding of a relationship to godness and to source. It's going to be varied all over the place. So when I'm speaking tonight about some of these things, it might sound like I'm cutting a broad swath and saying, oh, this language comes from this region and A plus B equals C. And that's really not what I'd like to do. But for the sake of brevity, which I'm not too good at, we're going to go ahead and just go with that tonight. So, yeah, call in if you'd like. I'd like it if you did. But yes, so getting off on that tangent was fun, but let's get back to it. One of the things that I'm finding as I deepen my relationship to the work of what we call magic, which magic is just a technology of life that is unquantifiable by material Western science. Once Western materialist views can co-opt and quantify a magical practice, they claim it's not magical and that it's a logical, rational practice. So a lot of what we understand to be magic hundreds of years ago today is just called science. Well, just a little bit of a hint here for anybody who doesn't know. Magic is a science. It is something that's been practiced, and it's something that's continuing to be practiced, and it's continuing to refine itself all the time, and the relationship to the world changes by the practitioner, which changes the world. So it's hard to wrap your head around words like science when we have these Neil deGrasse Tysons and Bill Nyes who seem to run the science game to the average layperson. And they're just celebrities on TV who really don't have a deep grasp of the thousands of years of scientific practices being done, most often done in secret or without the expressed permission of the powers that be, because that type of information, that type of work, that knowledge is empowering. And that's the last thing that those in power want, is to have an empowered populace. It doesn't work for them. Empowered people tend to not be controlled. So we don't buy, plastic cup sugary drinks on the daily because we're empowered. We are healthier, and we have an ability to not need to fill ourselves with these consumer products as much. That's one theory, at least. So one of the things that we have learned from all these various cultures throughout history is that sound is extremely important in the development of all things, right? That's kind of a basic thing to say for anybody who's into physics at all, or to studying any of these origin myths. Let's just call them what they are. Even the theories that we have today are still origin myths. But sound seems to be the basis for life as we know it. You have sound and light. These things create everything that we know. And it changes things. It moves things. It shapes things. So why would it not continue on with the human voice? And when you're specifically talking about the ancient languages, now these are languages that have culminated together out of disparate cultures that have, through whatever reason, decided to share a single language. They would have kept their original languages as well, but this was the common language, whatever it was for whatever region you're in. So let's take Hebrew or Sanskrit, for instance. These are ancient languages that, and Arabic, classical Arabic. These are ancient languages that a lot of the religious and magical texts that we have today stem from these languages, and they do that for a reason, because the study over time winnows down to its most basic elemental core where the power lies for these different things. So the naming of something is a power. It's a power either over that thing or a power through that thing. So if you're getting into Kabbalah and Solomonic magic, these things where you can call forth entities and spirits as your assists or as your fetches, you can use these languages, and the sounds that create these words are the sacred sounds that call forth and invoke these energies and these powers. It's kind of, I guess it's, the irony is I'm having a hard time explaining in words what these words do. But it's been known that these words, these sacred words, spoken in a specific way, especially when sung, elevating the words, elevating the voice to a stronger intention, and the sounds becoming elongated and hitting specific pitches and tones can create shifts and changes within a person. And when you have, let's just say, tens of people together singing these things, then you're creating a larger shift. When you have hundreds, it's even larger. And if you have thousands of people, you're going to create a critical mass of sound that can create a shift in all sorts of ways that we may not know or be familiar with. For instance, for some reason,
To all beef patty, special sauce, lettuce, cheese, pickles, onions on a sesame seed bun. To all beef patty, special sauce, lettuce, cheese, pickles, onions on a sesame seed bun. You deserve a break today at McDonald's.
McDonald's Big Mac, the great big sandwich with a great big taste.
So, you heard the jingle. You heard the song. If you are of my generation or older, you grew up hearing that everywhere, and you could probably recite it right now on the drop of a dime. You could sing that little song. Thousands of people all over the world, millions probably, know the words and the tune to that jingle. Now, if you think for a second that what I was saying earlier about these things, the efficacy of the magic behind these chants and these mantras is somehow in question, then ask yourself what a jingle is and why companies like McDonald's, Coca-Cola, Nike, all of these huge corporations have used jingles to not just sell a product, but create a movement of identity based around their products. Now, that sounds all really nice and conspiratorial, and it sounds really dark and negative, right? Anytime you're going to talk about these things, it's obviously you're coming at it from a negative bias, a negative slant, because none of us like to be mind controlled from outside. None of us like to think that singing these songs or having these jingles in our head means that we are also susceptible to the levels of mind control. So we don't like to think that. But when you have something like this.
Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare.
So when we start getting into chants like that, now chances are, if you are an American, either born or have assimilated into this culture, you have been somewhat surrounded by Christianity. And if you lived in the 80s at all, you were definitely steeped in satanic panic. And part of that included this demonization of anything non-Christian. And any chanting that was done by a non-Christian organization was seen as brainwashing and mind control. So when you go from that, demonizing a chant like that, to completely supporting and allowing for, chants like the Big Mac jingle, then
To all beef patty, special sauce, lettuce, cheese.
Then what you've effectively done is created this false dichotomy between the two things. You've been able to use cognitive dissonance to separate out, capitalism and consumer control from a religious, spiritual devotion. So what essentially I'm saying is that the Big Mac jingle is a mantra of spiritual devotion to a godhead called McDonald's. They've created with the golden arches and all of their symbolism that actually goes back thousands and thousands of years. The golden arches is an alchemical symbol, also representing gold, and it's mercurial, the great M. All of these elements play into a religious devotion that is akin to any other religion in the world. And in fact, that's quite possibly how these companies have been able to get a foothold to become a world superpower. These companies are everywhere. They're ubiquitous, and they have been able to slide in to the secular mind and the religious mind equally and seemingly without question. Think about that for a minute. If I were to come to you and I were to introduce you to a chant, if I were to introduce you to a, let's just take a Solomonic chant, and I were to explain to you, first I would to chant the chant to you, and then I were to explain to you the powers behind that chant, you might get freaked out. You might think, oh man, I don't want anything to do with this. Like this is some creepy witchcraft. It's gonna. I read about this in the 80s, and it's gonna make me kill babies and blah 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 and all that other Alex Jones mumbo jumbo garbage. But you're not going to think the same thing about pop songs that you hear on the radio, and you're not necessarily going to think the same thing about jingles that you hear on commercials. And so what level of cognitive dissonance is required there to create that compartmentalized view of sound and of your world, of the things that we feed our body? Now, if I can point to you in the direction of studies that show how sound can actually affect your physical body, and you can look this up and you can watch the studies on the different frequencies, and when used in proper ways and in conjunction with one another in specific harmonics and tonics, that it can change the way your body actually feels. It can create nausea. It can create feelings of joy. It can create sadness. Sound has the ability to really affect us because we are essentially beings of sound. So, and that doesn't even require an oral understanding. We don't actually have to hear these sounds. Your body can feel these sounds, these vibrations. Sound is vibration. So, if I were to say that to you, there's a good chance that most people would agree with that. There's a good chance that most of us would say, yeah, well, the science is in on that. You know, we understand sound is vibration, and we understand how this works. Yet, we continue to allow ourselves in our oral landscape, in our sound landscape, to have an environment that is being manipulated and controlled for profit of a few at the detriment of many. So, for instance, if I were to be able to, and it's not my intention to ever convince anyone. I don't want to con anyone into anything. So I'm not trying to change your heart and mind or convince you of something. But if you were to hear this,
lettuce, cheese, pickles, onions on a sesame seed bun.
And every time you heard that, you pictured the rainforests of Brazil being mowed down by huge machines so that McDonald's can have cheap beef to fill with sugars and preservatives and feed to the poor masses to induce diabetes, obesity, mental disorders. I mean, mental health is highly dependent upon nutrition, what we eat. So if every time you heard this,
you deserve a break today,
you were to equate to that toxic mentality the same way that when you hear this,
Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare.
You equate that to cults and brainwashed people. For whatever reason your training has taught you that, think about the implications of that, of how we associate these different sounds with something. And then maybe we can get to the next level of understanding, which actually, eventually, I think, would probably make all of it somewhat irrelevant, because it's all a tool to go deeper inward, right? All of these elements, these sounds, are a way for us to shift and create pathways inside of our bodies, physically, inside of our minds, mentally, and inside of our spirit, ethereally, to go into a deeper place of understanding. We may not know this consciously. We may not associate this consciously. But sound is doing that at all times. Even right now, the sound of my voice on your radio. Now, I could study certain hypnotic language techniques, and by speaking in certain speech patterns, I might be able to cast a wide net out into an audience, and maybe I'll catch 3% of that audience with a hypnotic technique. And these techniques are studied, and millions of dollars a year go into advertising firms to make use of these techniques. Joel Osteen, the billionaire megachurch preacher, most definitely has a deep understanding of the power of language and speech patterns. And if you don't think so, maybe look at his bank account. Look at his multiple homes. Look at this empire that he's built just as a preacher. He doesn't create anything. He doesn't build anything. He doesn't make you a sellable product. He doesn't provide a service to anybody in the world. All he does is use his voice in a way that can hypnotize tens of thousands into the millions of people to do his bidding. That type of power, I think we've seen historically, is dangerous. So it's not just the Joel Osteens. It's not just the Hitlers. It's not just the Charlie Mansons. It's not just the Barack Obamas and the Donald Trumps. If you think that Donald Trump is an idiot, then you have to re-question what all is happening up here. I think this is a very designed program that is using these algorithms of social engineering. And they're able to tap into exactly what needs to be said and in what ways it can be said to harvest the desired result. And I think that's all done through sound. So, where does that leave us then? Are we all just victims to sound, to these people who understand sound? No. We're not victims to anything. We are all the source of the experience of all of these things, right? All of us are not just the targeted audience of social engineering and mind control by mass religions and all that. No. We are actually the conduits for these things. And mantra, chanting, sound, these are ways in which we can empower ourselves as well. We hear words like mind control and we instantly snap into a view of a nefarious group of people sitting around a table bumping Jay-Z albums and throwing the triangle fingers up, and we think we're being dominated and controlled when we hear that word. But what if we were to understand mind control as the same way we understand breath control, or the way that we understand physical body control? When we watch a dancer, they have control over their body. They can use their body in these magical ways to emote energies and feelings and really bring up these amazing, powerful emotions in each of us that are witnessing this through the movements of their body. Now, that's a magical practice in and of itself. And that's a magical practice that comes from all different cultures, and it's got different names everywhere, wherever you go. And this is why dancing has oftentimes been banished by these religions and these institutions of religious power, because they understand the power that body movement has. That's a body control, right? So if we were to understand mind control as in I have the ability to control my mind and not let my thoughts be taken astray to these other things, these things that just pop into our heads, whether we like it or not. All of a sudden, just out of nowhere, you're driving down the road and that pops into your head, right? So what if we had mind control of ourselves? What tool would you use to create that? Now, why wouldn't we be able to use the sound, the language, focusing in on something to create a desired effect of controlling our own minds, our own thoughts? That is the purpose of mantra. And that's where we go into a whole nother level of psychological understanding, into a psycho-spiritual understanding of the power that we have as a being. Can we be controlled externally by sound? Yes. I mean, I think we're talking about that right now, right? I mean, we're looking at the way that these different sounds and these different songs get stuck in your head, and you can relate that to an experience, maybe not even your own experience, but you relate it to an experience that you've learned, and that can create certain triggers in your body to either crave something or detest something. Well, if you can have the power to do that as well, then why not understand this practice? Now, these practices are hundreds of thousands of years old. It's not even just thousands of years. Now, this 10,000-year civilization line is highly fallible. I think that almost anybody who takes looking at historical texts and cultures seriously is not going to follow the timelines used by public school systems describing, the pyramids being 5,000 years old and all of this garbage. If we start understanding the age by which these things go back to, we can then understand how, if something has maintained itself unbroken through lineages of even secret societies because of the threats of the powers that be throughout history, but have been able to pass down this information, it may be getting passed down because it works, right? It may be getting passed down because it has a desired effect. And if we can study these things and learn these things, then we'll understand. So Heinrich Cornelius Agrippa, 1500s, made a book called De Occulta Philosophia, and he says inside of it that essentially vocal speech and language are some of these ways by which we can encounter angels and demons. I can find the exact quotes, but he's relaying it back to the language of Hebrew. Hebrew is one of the ancient languages, one of the ones that goes back as far as we can go. And it's Jewish people as well as other practitioners of the occult relate the Hebrew language to, because it's an ancient language and a divine language, relate it back to the roots of magical languages. It's one of the few languages that we have that go back. I think it'd be safe to say that, in the Abrahamic tradition, we have Hebrew. We also have Old Arabic. We have Sanskrit, Vedic Sanskrit, Vak, Sabda, and that comes from the Vedic traditions. But the Agrippa was talking specifically about the Hebrew language and referencing the confusion of languages in Babylon, and how that confusion of languages, if you study that thing that occurred, what you saw was a conflation that occurred that created the inability for anybody to really source power over another, because there was just such a great amount of confusion. There was and this is a mythology. It also could be historically accurate, but either way, we can relate to these stories, whether you're Christian or not, whether you even understand these stories. You can relate to the concepts behind them, just like you can understand the morality of a tale that we see in a movie today. People are discussing the morality of Midsummer or of Us, and what does it mean? What does it all mean? Well, if we can all agree to that, then we can agree that we can study these Abrahamic traditions without being Christian or Jewish as well. So this story of the Tower of Babel, where everybody came out speaking languages they didn't understand each other, what that does is that creates a world of confusion, meaning sound is now being distorted in ways that one person can't understand the sounds coming out of another person's mouth. These agreements have been thrown to the wind, and now we have this massive confusion. It's going to be the basis for creating a disparity and war, essentially. But if we have a language older than that, right, we have a language that precedes that, such as ancient Hebrew, then we can start to understand some of the powers that can be passed down. For instance, right, that's Yod-He, Vod-He. You're still hearing in the background a little bit. I don't know why. I'm getting some background sound here. Wonderful. So those sounds, this is used in Kabbalistic workings, Solomonic workings. It's part of the Tetragrammaton mantra and chanting. And I would love it if somebody wanted to call in and expound on these things, 541-592-4112. But one of the interesting things about that, right? So one of the things that we read about in the Hebrew text and the Old Testament in the Christian lexicon is that you can't actually say the name of God, the actual name of God. And the Yod-He, Vod-He, YHVH, is the approximation of the sounds that you can say of the name of God. But another interesting aspect of that is if you look at the ancient Hebrew language, those four characters in the Hebrew language would also be used as, I think the word I'm looking. What is the word? Is it an onomatopoeia when the word sounds like something? There's a word there for that I'm blanking on right now. But at any rate, it's used to represent breathings. If you were to spell out breathing, those are letters you would use. You know, like the same way that we spell out ha 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 ha, or the sound of sneezing or the sound of snoring. You know, these words would be that's the sound of the name of God. So what does that mean? So breathing is the name of God. Breathing is God. God is breath. Breath is spirit, right? Is spiritus, to inspire, to breathe in, to expire, to breathe out. So now we're getting to a deeper understanding of where sound and the voice is used through a very practiced and intentional way to create and manifest different states of being. Breath. So what happens if you start changing and intentionally using your breathing patterns? You can do lots of things. I think all of us know about hyperventilation, right? When somebody hyperventilates, what happens? Oxygen levels change in the body. You can over-oxygenate the blood and create a feeling of euphoria. You can under-oxygenate the blood and create these feelings of dysphoria, these things you're not attached to your body, and you can then leave the body. You can start to begin astral projection, and all of this can happen through breathing, through different breathing exercises. So chanting is a way to control your breathing patterns. If I begin to chant these sounds, these specific vowel sounds, in these elongated patterns, then I'm holding my breathing patterns for these extended periods of time, right? So there's two things happening. There's a sound being emitted and a vibration in my body. That's the sound. And there's a changing and a shifting of my breathing. And if we look at these ancient languages and can say, oh, well, the sound of God's name is the sound of breathing. So now we're starting to understand that breath is possibly the doorway to the soul. Breath is a pathway into our mind. And breathing is a way by which we can begin to open these discussions and these pathways into our empowerment. Well, think about that. Think about that for just a second. Like, look at what we see in the world all around us. Look at what's happening to our air. Look at what happens to, we have these machines pumping out these toxins all over the place that make breathing actually a weapon. They've weaponized our breath. They've weaponized the air that we breathe, and through the use of various tools of song and language, we've been able to shift the way that we all share a shared experience. Another thing that's true in this is that when we begin to breathe in sync with one another together, we begin to lock in energetically with one another. And this is proven on a physiological level as well by choirs. So there was a study done where a choir, and I can't cite the source of the study, but you can look this up. A choir was all linked to heart monitors and breathing monitors. And as they began to sing the song, everybody's breathing and heart rates were varied, right? But by the time they got to the middle of the song they were singing together, where they're all singing in unison, something strange happened. Their breathing patterns obviously linked up because they're all singing the same words. So they're all exhaling at the same time and inhaling on certain cues. And their heart rates began to be in unison. So you could have 35 people standing in a room, all on different energy levels. Maybe their minds are different places. Maybe their bodies are in different states of feeling and being. Maybe their anxiety levels are at different levels, and their heart rates are varied. But through the simple act of singing together in a group, in locking in their breath, locking in the sounds coming out of their bodies, they can sync their heartbeats and their rhythms. So now you have 35 different people all of a sudden unifying into one organism, creating one rhythm of sound and vibration. That's huge. That's huge. And think about how much that happens on a daily basis to us, how much we do this, singing along with songs on the radio or whatever. We're locking into something much deeper than we can understand. Now, if we were to compound that with intention and a group of people that share an intention, I wonder what we could do. I wonder where that could take us. But it's coming up on quarter till the hour here. You're listening to KXCJLP 105.7 FM Cave Junction. This is Weird World Radio, and I'm your host, Wyrd, and it's really great to be back in the studio tonight, but it's a little lonely. So give us a call, 541-592-4112. Phone lines are going to be open. I'm going to go ahead and play some more chanting for you guys. So this, I want to say too that these chants, they are powerful. They have their own power. They have their own source. And we've been taught so much, especially in Western society, but I think in the modern world period, that these powers aren't real. They don't really exist, and you just ignore it. Don't think about it. And I think that it still affects us anyway. I think that these sounds, I believe, and it doesn't matter what I believe, but I believe that these sounds do have the affected goal that they're reaching. So before I play this, I just want to say that this is a mantra to Kali Ma. And if you're familiar with the Hindu scriptures and the Vedic traditions, this is a Sanskrit mantra to a goddess mostly known as the goddess of destruction. But this can bring some very powerful, disruptive, destructive things into your life if you begin chanting it, and even if you're listening to it, if you believe, and if you set your intention in your path there. So just, be mindful and enjoy. This is also a very good time to call into the show on a musical break. 541-592-4112.
a couple big strings of garlic. We got to get ourselves some fresh lamb's blood. And then we got to... Ray, do you want them to take your family, kidnap them, tear their livers out, and make some kind of satanic pate?
No, I'm not going to listen to this.
Ray, you're chanting.
I'm not going to
Ray.
hear this now. I'm not
Ray, look.
going to
Ray.
listen to this.
Unconscious chanting. You're chanting.
Hear this now.
I want to kill everyone. Satan is good. Satan is our pal. Ray, you're chanting. Hey, once they get in here, it's over, pal.
Nama Parvati Pataye Hara Hara Mahadev. Nama Parvati Pataye Hara Hara. Nama Parvati Pataye Hara Hara. Shiva Shiva Shankara Mahadeva. Hara 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 Mahadeva. Shiva Shiva Shankara Mahadeva. Shiva Shiva Shankara Mahadeva. Nama Parvati Pataye Hara Hare. Nama Parvati Pataye Hara Hare. Shiva Shiva Shankara Mahadeva. Shiva Shiva Shankara Mahadeva.
And that's George Harrison from his album Brainwashed. I think it's a fantastic name for an album, especially an album comprising Sanskrit mantras. George Harrison was well known for having connected to the Hare Krishna movement and deepened his religious experience and brought that into pop culture through some very big hit songs. And and so I think Brainwashed is a great name because that's something that's being used as hurled as an insult. You're brainwashed. And especially Christians, which I think is really interesting, seem to be very concerned with, people being brainwashed into cults, which, pot, kettle, black. But if you look at the word itself, to wash your brain, it's like, oh, wait a second. Maybe if we can self-empower to cleanse our mind of all of the control mechanisms through using different mantra. And I'm not saying that becoming Hare Krishna and chanting the Mahamantra is going to free you and liberate you. I mean, maybe it can. Anything can. And it definitely has very, very powerful effects. And I quite enjoy chanting the mantras, especially in Krishna temples when I get to visit them around the country. It's one of my favorite things to do. Whenever we go to a town that has a Hindu temple or a Krishna temple, I'll want to go in and spend time there in prayer, because so much loving energy in prayer and devotion to loving energy in prayer is placed into these buildings. And just being in those spaces creates for me an environment where my body can tune in deeper into these intentional energies surrounding me safely. Unlike being at the bus station or the shopping mall, I'm not a spiritually attuned person that's strong enough to completely be here now, as Ram Dass would say, and always be there wherever you are. I'm still affected by, things like electromagnetic pulses and sounds and vibrations and advertising and anxieties, and I'm empathic to the people around me. So I have a hard time with that, but I have an easier time to focus in these intentional spaces, and that's the purpose of these spaces, to use as a tool for those of us who can't necessarily just tap in on a whim. But the mantra that's being used there is created for that purpose. Mantra, by its definition, at least if we take the Oxford definition, is any sounds that we use, a repetition of a word or words to be able to focus in our meditation. That could be as it's simple as talking to yourself and repeating something to yourself to psych yourself up. I remember junior high football. We would sit in a circle right before the game, and the coach was, and this is absolutely true. And then it amazes me that we still question the patriarchal violence in this society. We would sit in a circle, these 12-year-old boys being led by this, grown man standing in a circle around him. After he prays for a healthy outcome in the game, he would stand us in a circle and chant, kill, 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 kill. And that was supposed to pump us up into this aggressive, violent space to go out onto the football field and cause harm to the others in a playful and playful way in sports. But that the simple act of repeating this word in a rhythm and a pattern that increases in intensity and in volume had the ability to turn on these psychological elements of ourselves to be merciless and ruthless and more violent. And then the same thing can be said on the other side of that spectrum when you're going into a stressful situation. Maybe it's, a job interview or whatever it is, a stressful situation. Before you come in the space, you can calm yourself down. You can breathe. Relax. It's okay. It's going to work. It's going to be fine. We do this. We repeat these things. So the mantra is simply a way to focus our minds and our energies. It's mind control. It's self-mind control or mind self-control. And it's a way that we can harness the power of our minds, which generate so much of our truth in this world. We've talked about egregores for the last year on the show, how our thoughts and our minds and our beliefs, strongly enough held, can create these realities. And the mantra is a way to harness some of that power, to focus our energy, to actually drop our blood pressure, to relax our breathing, to decrease our heart rate, and to put us in a more calm space, to bring our breathing down, to bring our voice, our volume down, and to relax. And we teach this to children, not enough. There's schools out now in this country that are using meditation instead of punishment, and they're starting to find that these group meditations are actually improving children's ability to relate to one another, and their empathy levels are going up. The violence and aggression levels in their play is dropping drastically. Their ability to focus on tasks at hand is increasing, and they're finding a lower rate of crime and a longer stay in school. Kids are more focused on their education. Whether that's for better or for worse is a different topic to discuss. But we're seeing positive outcomes in that these children are able to kind of self-regulate as opposed to being told what to do. They're able to control their bodies in whatever situation and not be at the whim of outside forces that are pushing them to be violent or aggressive or whatever it is, like a football coach getting you to chant kill before a game. Learning these tools, these techniques of breathing and of sound can do that, has that power to do that. So when we start talking about mantra in this way, we can deepen that into this understanding on this esoteric level of these ancient Vedic scriptures and these Sanskrit mantras, and this is the mantra that's going to make you rich, and this is the mantra that's going to make you safe, and this is the mantra that's going to make you popular. And there's all these quick fix, new age, Western influences, capitalist influences on what these mantras can do. Sure, why not? Quick fix yourself, get yourself a sage bundle from Sephora, and, get your prayer beads from wherever you want to get them from. I don't care. And do your daily mantras, and you'll be rich, and you'll have a yacht someday. Why not? Or you can come at it from a real perspective of the mantras that you use in your daily life are creating the outcome that you wish for. And that applies itself not only towards those of us who are having a focused practice, but more so, I think, to all of our unfocused practices throughout the day, right? All of these things, the mantras that we have in our head, I'm not good enough. Oh, they're going to screw me anyway. They're just trying to get something out of me. I'm not going to be able to afford this thing. I'm not going to be able to do this. These mantras, these things that we repeat, these things that we focus on are key in understanding our power. And this isn't just about positive thinking. That's not where I'm going with this. This isn't a Tim, what's his name? Tom Robbins? I don't know what his name is. This isn't some motivational poster speaking. This is simply stating that if you repeat something enough in your head, then you're going to create it in your body and in your life. So why not devote enough energy to yourself to repeat the things that you want for yourself? There's somebody told me once that when we complain, we're saying a prayer for the thing that we don't want. And I think that there's some really powerful truth in that, or at least some wisdom. When we complain, we say a prayer for what we don't want. And if there's a way to reframe these things in our own view of our life as a way to position ourselves in the seat of power, to say, I am not going to be affected by you in a way that I lose my power. I am going to interact with you on an equal playing field of power. We are going to co-create our world together, and I am not going to fall for this negative destruction of my power. I'm not going to abdicate myself to you. I'm not going to give up my power anymore. If we can do that, I wonder what that could bring forth. I wonder. I don't know. I'm not good at these things. I'm not, these things interest me, and I've seen the powerful effects of some of these things. Chanting the mantras intentionally has led me into some of the most deepest, beautiful, psychedelic experiences I've ever had without having to take something externally. Now, I do highly appreciate psychedelic experiences, and I'm not one of these people that is going to, distinguish, well, I like the natural stuff versus, the unnatural, whatever. Your psychedelic experience is yours. Don't let anybody take that away from you and try to control what's more natural and what's not. These are all tools, and these are all things that we can use in our growth or to our demise, depending on, our ability to understand them and to be literate in the language of these medicines, to be literate in the language of these symbols, and to be literate actually in these languages that we're speaking and singing in and chanting. And once you gain that literacy, you gain levels of power. You empower yourself. And so I wonder, based on my personal experience of having mantra play such an amazing transformational role, even in just a short period, sitting for an hour in prayer and in chanting, I've been to the depths of my own death. I've been to these regressive places throughout my life, my timeline. I've been able to go back decades and decades and decades and generations through my familial lines and meet family ancestors that I would have had no clue who they were if not for chanting the mantras and doing the breathing practices and the meditating enough. I've been able to have these experiences, and these experiences are real. These are real experiences. These are not my imagination working. People can say that, and maybe it is. Sure, let's call it that. Let's name it imagination, and from there, then we can either empower that or we can disempower that. But I happen to think that it's absolutely fine to empower your imagination. Why not? Why are we so scared of forming new ideas? Isn't that what imagination is? It's the ability, the agency to form an idea or a concept of something external of the self. So if we lose our imagination, then we aren't able to actually construct our worlds. That's a big deal. That's a big deal. So when somebody is wanting to discount your spiritual experience as simply being something that's unquantifiable and probably just something with your own body chemistry, I don't understand what's not magical about that still. I'm sorry, I just don't. I don't understand what's not magical about my body being able to create a chemical reaction inside of itself to open entire pathways to have a full-on experience with my entire being. That's magic. and it's real. It's real magic. So through the mantras, I've been able to do this, and that brings my question to: what else am I doing through the mantras that I have that I'm unaware of? What mantras do I have that are creating a magical outcome of something that I don't want to be there? Or what magical outcomes am I creating and manifesting around me that I'm just simply not able to witness, that I'm not able to see because I haven't tuned in to those frequencies and those experiences enough? Because I'm so distracted by something else, and my brain's going 35 different ways, which that's pretty much the story of my brain. It's going nonstop, and I have a really hard time laying down at night to go to sleep. Maybe you have the same thing. If you're up at Sunday night on 11:10 at night listening to me blabber on, then you might be a person who has a hard time going to sleep when you want to. And if that's the case, if maybe your brain is going all over the place too, and you're stuck in all of these timelines of thought, and you're stuck in all of these relationships that you've had and these conversations that you've had, and you have regrets and you'd like to change things. Well, what if you were able to focus that energy and create for yourself a clear path to move forward in a way that you choose? If you had that level of control, I'm putting forth that learning these tools, these techniques, mantra is a technique, right? Chanting is a technique. These, and technique also shares the same root as the word technology. These are technologies, right? These are tools that we have developed as a human species to be able to use them to a greater destination, to something that we choose beyond where we are in this moment, right? That's what a tool is. That's a technique. That's a technology. So if we can understand spiritual technology, if we can understand that, well, for some reason, whatever it is, we have these God concepts. For some reason, we have this spiritual experience, this unquantifiable experience in the material world. And for some reason, those experiences have been a driving force for entire civilizations to rise and fall. And if for some reason, to this day, a couple of million years that we know of down the timeline of the Homo sapien or the Homo erectus, the Homo species, we are still seeking out the root of these spiritual experiences, and we're just not finding it, but we are through this time chipping away at and refining techniques to get there. And we've met people who have gone there. We've documented these situations of people who have seemingly surpassed what we think of as human limits, human limitations, because of their devotion to these techniques and these technologies, these spiritual technologies. Then why not me? Why not I? Why not you? Why don't we put as much energy into that as we do into being right on Facebook? As much time as I spend in my day on my device, synced into a screen where I am hopelessly devoted to a God that I don't understand, to a God that is not me, a God that's outside of me. My devotion is monk-like. A person sitting in mantra and prayer. For instance, the Krishna mantra that I was playing earlier by Prabhupada, he's chanting the Hare Krishna, right, the Maha Mantra. He's doing this. That single version that I have is an hour long. I have recordings of this man chanting that mantra for 10 hours without ceasing. Sitting, holding prayer beads, chanting that mantra 108 times 16 times 16 times 16. Doing this for 10 hours nonstop, right? How many of us put that much devotion into our smartphones? How many of us put that much devotion into a job that we don't like? How many of us put that devotion into binge watching Stranger Things season 3? That's 10 hours right there. That's 10 hours. We probably watched it in 3 days, So 10 hours of devotion right there. Some of us watched it in one sitting. If we were to be able to do that same thing, if we were to be able to believe in ourselves enough to dedicate that much time to our progress and ourselves, I wonder where we would be. I wonder. I don't know. I mean, I'm not pushing a religion here. I don't care what language it is you're going to use to get to this place. I don't care if it's completely secular. We can agree just on a base level, a base scientific understanding that sound and focus can change physical outcomes. We can use sound to move things. We can use sound to read things in our body, to understand things about ourselves. We can use sound to shift and change those things. So if that's true, if we can agree to that, non-religiously speaking, then this is for anybody, right? This is something any of us can do. And I wonder, well, I don't want to say why we don't do it. I wonder why we do it unconsciously. I wonder why we do it on behalf of the corporations.
To all beef patty, special sauce, lettuce, cheese.
Yeah. Why do we do that to ourselves? Why do we continue these pathways? Maybe it's because we're somewhat wired to have these elements in our life. There's a hole there. There's an opening. Let's not call it a hole because that has negative connotations, I think. And it shouldn't, but maybe it does. In my head, it does. So there's an opening there that's going to be filled, right? Like when you have. So I lived in Tucson, Arizona for a long time, and we have these riverbeds that are dry riverbeds all over the place, these arroyos. And during monsoon season, these riverbeds become these rushing torrents of water, right? I mean, so strong and fast, and it happens so quickly that every year, dozens of cars are washed miles downstream in these things, and it's something you see on the daily news during monsoon season about how many vehicles were pushed downstream, how many people were trapped in their vehicles during these monsoons. So the point of that is that these riverbeds are empty. It's an empty space. It's an open space, and when it comes, every one of those spaces is filled. So think of ourselves in that way. This water and these open spaces are going to be filled by something. Something's going to fill them. So maybe we unconsciously participate in these mantras and these chanting through pop culture, through singing pop songs together, through advertising, because we are built for this. This is a tool that can be used by all of us, and it's being shifted by some outside force because there's an opening there for it. But if we can tap into that by our own choosing, create our own mantras, create our own chants, using some of the ancient ones that have lived through hundreds of generations of people and various power structures, but still maintain their place and their power, then maybe that would elevate us, lift us to a different level. Or maybe not. Maybe we'd still be the same culture just because it's just a practice that we do. I don't know. But I'm curious. And I wonder if you're curious too. 541-592-4112. And I want to get to some more discussions here, but I want to let you know that Wild Bills is one of our underwriters. And underwriters are the people and the businesses in our small town that have decided that this service that we provide at KXCJ is valuable. And it's valuable to them, so they help sponsor it and fund it and make it happen. And they pay our bills. So Wild Bills is one of those people, located in Cave Junction at 202 North Redwood Highway, offering a collection of locally sourced glass bongs, pipes, and headies, as well as dab rigs, jewelry, and leatherwork. Open 9 to 9 Monday through Saturday and noon to 5 on Sundays. Wild Bills has been meeting the glass needs of the Illinois Valley and Crescent City since 1998. Thanks, Wild Bills, for being a part of this. And if you're interested in becoming an underwriter or sponsoring this show or any aspect of KXCJ, you can go to www.kxcj.org and look for the Donate Now button or follow the links to becoming an underwriter. We would love to have your support. And the more of us that do this, the options for us open wider and wider all the time. We'll be able to do more stuff as a community. You can also listen to us live stream at www.kxcj.org, or you may be listening to KXCJLP 105.7 FM Cave Junction, because that's where we're playing right now. So I want to let you know we do PSAs here, public service announcements. And if you have a public service announcement, something that's for a nonprofit or something you just want to let people know about happening in the Valley, you can do that through our site too. And I want to let you know that there's good news. The Painted Rooster Bakery and Farm Stand is now open. Their grand opening kicks off Monday, September 2nd, and features artisanal stone hearth breads, pocket sandwiches, local produce and farm goods, and homemade ice cream. Located in the newly renovated Kirbyville Farm Building at 23790 Redwood Highway, the Painted Rooster is now open. 7:30 a.m. to 5:30 p.m. Monday through Saturday, closed on Sundays. That's tomorrow morning, y'all. 7:30 in the morning. You can start your day with fresh baked pastries, get yourself a cup of coffee, get some ice cream for breakfast. Why not? You're a human. You can do what you want, right? Ice cream for breakfast. But yeah, go check it out. It's really exciting that place is getting used because it's a fantastic resource for the Valley. Okay, I'm gonna get to some more chanting here. Let's take a quick music break and maybe we'll listen to some. Here we go, some Rosy Cross. This is the ancient Rosicrucians chant here being sung by some monks. So check it out. So that was a little bit of Rosy Cross, Rosicrucians, a Rosicrucian chant. So I'm trying to play some of these varying chants from around the world, and it's really hard to touch on all of them because they are from every place on the planet. You know, wherever humans have been, these chanting has become a part of the religious and spiritual practice of peoples all over the place. So I'm wondering, moving on from that, actually, I want to interject some of the serious conversation with, so I'm always kind of curious why I say some of the things I say. Like, for instance, the word hello. Like, what does that even mean, right? Like, where does that word come from? What's the root of that word? Why do we say hello to people? And of course, I remember reading a long time ago that we say hello when we answer the phone because Alexander Graham Bell was the one that kind of normalized that and wanted people to do that. But apparently, the original hello in that situation was ahoy, as what was being gone for. People were pushing for ahoy when you answered the phone. But anyway. I decided to look up the word hello, and I was curious because of some of my studies of ancient Scandinavian Old Norse religions. Hela is a goddess, and I was like, well, hello, Hela, maybe there's something there, a greeting by invoking this specific god, this specific entity. But what I actually found was even more shocking, and so Oxford English Dictionary places the word going back from Old High German hala or hola, which goes back even further, whose origins may have been in the French holla, Holla, like I ain't no holla back girl. So the word hello's origins, as far back as the Oxford English Dictionary can trace it, goes back to using any of the 5 vowels in conjunction with the L's and the H sound, but specifically the word hala, which I guess translated from the Old French was roughly "whoa there." Hold on, whoa there. I thought that was pretty funny. It has really nothing to do with mantras, except for it's a word that we say an awful lot to greet somebody. And I was always wondering what we were saying when we greeted someone. What meaning does that have? The first interaction with someone, in any way, how does that, you saying these words, how does that set a tone for conversation? What are we actually doing when we say these things? I guess we could read into it even further and go into the phonetic sounds of the word and make those connections. But I was curious, and I think that there's many of us out there that have these curiosities, how language actually works. Now, for a long time, I have followed the work of various anarcho-primitivist writers and philosophers, and John Zerzan definitely is one of my favorites in that world of philosophy, of anarcho-primitivism. And Zerzan has always been able to put forth some somewhat controversial ideas that people want to tear apart, but really they're pretty sound theories in a lot of ways. And his theory on language is that language is the crucial step that actually separates us from freedom and wildness, and is one of the initial steps into the domestication and dominance and control over our mind and over our experience. As language comes in, he contends that mediation is the first step, that language is the first mediation between you and your direct actual experience. And, of course, the knee-jerk reaction to that is, well, no language, no art, no language, no music, no language, no communication. But I'm wondering if there's a communication older than language. I'm wondering how we communicated before we had these defined languages that we speak to one another. Is there a universal language that we have that's non-oral, that's non-definitive, that doesn't have the is as a component? These hardline definitions of who you are or what you will be, who you will be, the to be. that really shrinks the possibilities of your existence. It puts us in a little box. We box ourselves in. I am this thing. I am Wilden. I am a radio host. I am, a cook. I am these things. That's basically painting this identity of who I want you to support me in my belief of who I am. When I say I'm these things, I'm telling you this lie about who I am, and I want you to agree to that lie, and I want you to reflect that lie back to me and tell me that that's who I am, so that I can be reassured in this identity. I can be reassured that my flesh and bone robot suit, my human suit, is my, this skin that I stretch over these bones and this spirit is this thing. And I'll do the same for you. And I think that's an interesting concept. I find that to be interesting, that we're maintaining these lies about one another. I think Ram Dass is one of the people that actually brought that conversation to a greater audience for the first time in my experience. The first time I heard this conversation, and it was a little different. He's talking about ego, and but it's the same thing. It comes down to the same ideas, that we have these concepts of who we want people to believe we are. And we need people to believe that, because that's when we can believe it, right? I can't believe these things about myself if you don't believe it, but if I get enough people to believe it, then I'll believe it too. And that's the codependency of identity. And we have these mantras, again, this mantra of who I am. Hello, I'm Wilden. Welcome to Weird World Radio. I'm your host. This is who I am. This is my mantra tonight. My mantra is, I'm this spiritually elevated person who has all of the answers from the mountaintops of guru wisdom. I am these things. And I want you to believe that. And I want you to parrot that back to me so that I can believe that about myself. And that's one way we use mantra, as a way to create for ourselves this idea of existence, of who we are. And that same concept is being used externally as well. And these other elements outside of us are using that same technique, that same goal. And so I'm curious how this affects you, how you've gotten into these discussions internally, how you have broken down the barriers of identity and of pain, body pains. A great example. I know so many people who live a lot of their day in pain, myself included. I mean, it's debilitating sometimes. And I wonder why I do that. I wonder why I choose to live in pain. And I know that sounds so victim blaming, but then when you already say that, you already conclude that you're a victim. You already conclude that you are the recipient of these things to you and not in control of your own life. You have no responsibility in your own body's experience. And I think on some levels, societally speaking, there's a trap, a societal prison that we're in that's absolutely true. It's absolutely true that we are not responsible for the things that are happening to us on a social level, on this societal trap. If we want to think of ourselves as the end of our existence, the end of our experience is this societal experience, if the end of my existence on this planet is my identity in society and how I relate to society, then sure, we are victims to poverty. We are victims to racism. We are victims to institutionalization. We are victims to rape culture. We are victims to patriarchy, because those things absolutely exist and dominate the world of the social experiment. And what is also true is we are much more than that. We are so much more than our social existence, so much more than our experience in this society. Now, that's not to say that these things in society are not real and not of value and not worth fighting for and changing, because they are. And it's always, always, always important to remember that you are bigger than the sum of those things, right? You are more than these relationships that you're born into that you have not consensually agreed to being a part of, right? So that's where it gets tricky. It gets hard because our privilege is speaking on one level, or our lack of privilege, our lack of agency, or our social mobility is speaking on one level to this society that we've agreed upon. And on a deeper level, the being that is us inside of this body and inside of this experience is experiencing something on a whole different level. And we oftentimes conflate the two. And we oftentimes forget that we are just driving these human suits somehow, in some way. Our animist experience is silenced under the weight of the isness of who you are and who your identity is, which also has led to us ostracizing ourselves from the relationship to the greater organism of life, right? We've created this individual soul experience where everything is just on you, and you don't have the way built into the language to relate to the living, breathing world all around you. You don't have a way to do that if you believe that you are confined to this identity and in this social experience and social experiment, then you're trapped. You really are of that situation in that time. And then, yes, by all means, you are a victim. By all means, you are subject to those things. And you don't have to be completely. Your experience can open through the use of psychedelics, through the use of mantra, through the use of meditation, through the use of any sort of transcendental experience, something that lets you transcend that existence to where you open up your relationship to all things and you start to see the connectivity and the life in everything around you. You ever eat acid and sit and watch the walls breathe for an hour? Well, guess what? They're breathing right now, whether or not you experience it in that way. It's always happening. These things are occurring at all times because there's life pulsing through everything that we see. And the reason there is life pulsing through everything that we see is because everything that we see is actually a projection of our being. Everything is a projection of ourselves. We're projecting these images. And by the way, what we see with our eyes is but a fraction of what exists in our world, in our projection of ourselves. So we've been limited by these five senses and these trappings of language to this being that exists only with what we can see, touch, feel, and hear. But once we start to transcend those blockages, those packages, we start to conflate the senses. We can see the things that we hear. We can taste the things that we feel. All of these senses start to become jumbled. And William Blake talked about this. That's when you see the infinite. So when we start to understand that life is pulsing through everything around us, then we understand that life is pulsing because of us. Life is exuding out of us. Then we start to understand our place in the cosmic world, our place in the divinity of all existence. And all of that just by saying a few mantras. Thanks for coming to my TED Talk. Have a good night. No, I mean, it's not just that simple, but it is at the same time. It is that simple. It is just simply a matter of being able to get to that place of flipping that switch of understanding. Now, it's the getting there that seems to be the trouble for a lot of us because we've built so many blocks between us and the doorway. We are literally sitting on a couch in a room and the door is just a few feet away, but we have built worlds in between us and that door, right? As soon as we create the idea that there is space between me and the doorway to everything, it may as well be 1,000 miles and I've got 1 foot. I'm going to crawl 1,000 miles to get there. As soon as I have decided upon agreeing to the notion that my liberation and my enlightenment and all of these great words that we want to understand for being something other than who we are, right? That next level of who we are, as soon as I can be better, as soon as I can do these, as soon as I've agreed that there is this separateness between me and that, then it may as well just be worlds away. But when I cease to agree to the concept that all of these things are outside of me and that I have to earn them and achieve them, as soon as I can get to the place in my experience where I've broken through the separation, then I can begin to realize it's not there. And I've touched on that in my life. I've been in that place. And I know that some of you have as well. I know that through the use of psychedelics, through the use of chanting, through the use of magic, through the use of spell casting, all of these different elements, I know some of you in the sweat lodge or in the crack house or anywhere that you are pushed to the greater limits of your understanding, you've gotten to the place where you understand your oneness with all. And I'm wondering if we could be there more if we were to be able to use these technologies that we've developed over the thousands of years, these spiritual technologies. And is it a place we need to be? Or is this experience in this world, this social agreement, is this where I need to be right now? Is this a level in my existence that I need to focus on because it's what's apparent to me? Maybe that's where I need to be. Maybe I'm here because that's where I am, and that's where I should stay, and that's where I need to do the greater amount of work. I don't know. What do you know? 541-592-4112. Give us a call. Let us know what you think about these ideas. I don't have a lot of sounds lined up. I've spent a lot of time trying to pick out my favorite mantras for tonight. And so I don't actually have a lot of music other than these mantras lined up. But things like the Prabhupada chanting Hare Krishna, I could play that for hours. But I think I want to find something a little different to play right now. I know that Runehild has a new album that's out now that's available through Grimfrost, but I unfortunately don't have that album yet. I would like to be able to play something off of it, but it doesn't actually hit the digital world until October 1st, I believe. So with that in mind, I'm going to go ahead and play a track by Runehild. This is not anything off of any of her albums, but this is something that she has on YouTube, and this is a drum circle song by Runehild. So that's Runhild. She's definitely one of my absolute favorites and go-tos. I listen to her almost daily. She's wonderful. And that song that she sang, she talks about in the description in the video that she learned it in drum circle, and it was the lyrics were written by two people, Hannah Sampson and Ulla Hildegard, and she has both the English and the Norwegian language for the words. In English, the words, and you may have heard her say it, you can pick it out, is, I am a part of all that is a part of me. I belong here into this world. I belong here as who I am. What I find really amazing about that song is that you can sing Wayfaring Stranger to the same melody that she's singing that song in, which, you know, is a song about being lost in this great world. And this song is an affirmation of belonging in this world. So it's not a duality. It's just a whole picture, a larger picture of the same thing. It's not opposing. These things aren't opposing. This is something I've been trying to wrap my head around. I keep hearing these concepts of two opposing things, you know, being together as a way to complete something. But I'm not opposed to myself. There's no part of me that's in opposition to me, right? So there's no part of life that's in opposition to life. Death is not an opposite of life. Death is a critical aspect of life. It's not the end of life. It's not the end of all life. It's the end of a relationship between a spirit and a body. But that spirit doesn't end, and that body doesn't end. That body just transforms. That body becomes part of the whole again. It's fed upon by millions of living beings who then die and get fed upon by millions of living beings. But it doesn't end. It just keeps moving through these great experience. So there's no opposites here. And it's something I've been really grappling with, especially how do I apply that into my politic, right? Where does politic play into this? Am I a victim to politics? You know, speaking of the social self, the social relationship that we have to this world, to our experience, right? Where our identities are being identified externally, and we are internalizing those identities, and we are then projecting an identity to the world that we want to be identified as for whatever reason, you know, like helpless children who so want the attention and the affection of something else that's empowered over us, something powering over us. That's what our relationship to society is, and that's how our politics get involved. So where's my politics when I oppose fascism, right? Am I opposing something then? Am I opposing a part of me? I don't know. I don't understand how this works. I want to heal it. I want to heal this chasm, and I want to bring all of these things that are trying to separate me from myself, from my experience, and I want to bring it together into one grand experience. To me, that inherently involves battling against ideologies of separation. But then you hear people saying, well, then if you fight it, you're just as bad as it. I don't agree. I don't think so. But what is true is by fighting it, I've entered into an agreement that it is valid, and that my view is valid. And so I've already entered into this agreement that we are separate. And I understand that. But that doesn't mean that I don't want to stop it from happening within the experience of the social relationship, right? We have a need to repair these social relationships that are entrapping people and subjugating people within the agreement of that social relationship. Just because it exists external of us, and we, doesn't mean that we can't shift that, and we don't have a responsibility to change that. We do. We have a responsibility to engage in this puppet show that our spirit, for whatever reason, has decided to project into our existence. We have a responsibility to make that a space to celebrate life and all of its beauty and all of its wonder. And that does require some resistance. That requires some some of our resilience and our ability to say no. No, I will not move for this force. I will not move aside while this force of fascism and this force of homophobia, transphobia, racism, sexism, rape culture, exploitation, I will not move out of the way so that these things can plow through my existence. And I think to do that requires a very centered and healthy perspective, a place that we can sit and be safe and be strong in who we are in the face of those things. Now, how that plays out and manifests itself in the physical world, I don't know. I'm not going to judge. I'm not going to sit here and tell you not to punch Nazis, because I'm not going to tell you that. I'm also not going to sit here and tell you not to offer hugs to people who are espousing Nazi propaganda on the streets. If that's what your weapon is, if you think and believe in your heart that going out and offering hugs to people is a way that you're going to heal your relationship to the world, then okay. But what is not going to heal our relationship to this is to try to stand by idly and let these things occur and let large parts of our world be subjugated and exploited. That's not going to work. So whether you're punching Nazis or hugging them, don't allow for an ideology of hate and an ideology of separation and isolation and exceptionalism to manifest itself into our world. Don't allow for it. You know, what is that? That's the same kind of agreement that we make unconsciously to things like McDonald's. We stand back and allow it to pervade our mental space, our spiritual space, right? We stand back and allow for that to come in.
To all beef patty, special sauce, lettuce, cheese, pickles.
And because we didn't take a stand against that, and maybe it should be reworded, maybe because we didn't take a stand to believe in ourselves, we didn't believe in the importance of the health of our communities, we didn't believe in the importance of the health of our cultures, right? We didn't believe in the importance of passing down recipes through generations. We didn't believe in the importance of the old ways and the old ones. We didn't believe in the importance of our relationship and connection to the earth enough that we allowed for an opening to come in, and it was filled by these people who did believe in their place in our world, right? They believed strong enough that they were able to convince us that they were safe and that they were okay and they were a natural part of our world. So they are. So we allowed that in. We've agreed to that relationship. At some point, we are going to have to agree to get rid of these ideologies of control and dominance and exploitation. And we're going to have to be led into that by the people whose lives have most been vulnerable and most been targeted by those behaviors and those mentalities and those ideologies, because they've never stood for it. They've never allowed for it to happen. We've just been able to subjugate them and silence their voice enough to bring it to the forefront. So now it's time that we take the lead from people who have done the work to want to get rid of these elements in our psyche. You know, these are opportunities for us to confront our own fascism, our own racism, our own sexism, our own homophobia, our own transphobia. These are ways for us to confront our own separation from one another and our own separation from our experience. Because that's what all of those words are. Those words are all just representations of the ways that we have allowed for separations to be built up, for walls to be placed between us. Ha ha ha. Think about that. Consider that. They're building a wall on the border. They're building a border on the border. You know, let's go back further. They've built a border there. They've created these separations and we've somehow agreed to them. So now we need to go to that next level and we need to fight against these things. Whoa.
Hey, how's it going?
Hi, who are you?
I'm Fred. This is Epoch's
show time right now.
No, I'm sorry, it's not. That's tomorrow. I'm sorry, I've got somebody in my studio right now. That's very odd. But okay. Well, it's actually the end of our show, so I'm going to go ahead and wrap up here. I'm really liking what we were doing with Runehild. So I'm going to give you one more song for Runehild to take us out with tonight. That was spooky. You all have a wonderful evening out there in the weird world. Thanks for tuning in this week. Stick with us. Next week, we're going to have, I believe, Olivia Barham, who is my teacher in death midwifery and Angela's teacher as well. Going to be discussing the art of death midwifery and her journey into becoming a veil walker. And yeah, it should be a wonderful show. All right, y'all. Thanks so much for tuning in tonight. Have a great night.